Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Hidebound Convivium. As always, this is HideCon here, and this is going to be a short video to sort of poll the audience as to what content they would like to see going forward in the future. As you know, this is a channel that's heavily focused on literature, and so I always want to have at least one literary project going where I'm reading and talking about some work of literature that my audience wants to see talked about, wants to hear read. Um, and I try to get more obscure things, things that maybe you wouldn't find as readily in other places. But I also am not averse to talking about more common things. Nevertheless, in the description, there will be a link to a straw poll or something like that where you guys can vote. But I thought I would take the opportunity to make a video where I sort of go through what books I have in my library and also tell you what I have on the way for you to make up your decision as to what you would prefer to see on the channel. So I've got a very beefy stack of books here that I would be willing to read out of. The first one I've got is this collection of four great American classics, and what it's got in here is it's got Huck Finn, The Scarlet Letter, The Red Badge of Courage, and Billy Budd the Sailor. I'm going to tell you right away, Huck Finn is too long for me to read on this channel, although it's a great book and you should all read Huck Finn. The Scarlet Letter, I don't like The Scarlet Letter, so I'm not going to read it, pure and simple. But I could be persuaded to read The Red Badge of Courage, just because I've never read The Red Badge of Courage. I've always heard it was a good book, and people recommended it to me as a kid, and I never read it. So maybe that would be something you guys would be interested in reading together. And Billy Budd is Melville, and I've been told that Billy Budd is uniquely incomprehensible compared to something like Moby Dick. So we probably won't do that either. Um, the next book I have, and I've already read out of this a little bit. This is the Anglo-Saxon World in Anthology from Oxford World Classics, and like I said, I've already read out of this a little bit. I've read some of the elegies. I think it was the Seafarer that I read specifically. But I could be persuaded to read more out of this book. Specifically, they have a complete translation of Beowulf. So that's a option. Another option would be various religious texts that they have in here. They have the Kingdom of God, which was written by, was it Cadman, I think? Uh, is that right? I don't know if that's right. I will look that up and make sure. No, I think it's the Venerable Bede is who wrote the Kingdom of God. And then there are various other religious writings in here from the Anglo-Saxon period. There's more Anglo-Saxon poetry, like for example, "The Dream of the Rood," and that's something I could knock out, in one video and talk a little bit about. Um, let's see, yep, and then there's a couple of sermons and stuff in the back, but that's most of what's in that book. The next, I have a couple of books of poetry, so I wouldn't read all of the poems, but I would, take some selected poetry and really talk about the strengths that each poet has. So one of those is John Keats. John Keats is a fantastic poet. He was sort of a late romantic poet, I think, around Percy Shelley's time, so sort of towards the end of the Romantic period. Keats is a fantastic poet, and if he had lived longer, he might actually have ended up being better than Shakespeare, so people say. But Keats has a lot of the sort of emotion and flowery language that you expect from romantic poets, but he's also not like as over the top and terrible as someone like Percy Shelley. So that's on the table. Another is William Wordsworth. Wordsworth, again, was a romantic poet, and I know people don't like romanticism, but Wordsworth is a really good poet, especially his sonnets. Wordsworth wrote lots of sonnets, and they're not all good, obviously, but I still think that Wordsworth is a fantastic poet and he's worth reading. So if you would like to get exposed to more Wordsworth, then there you go. The next thing I have is from Penguin Classics. It's an anthology of early American writing. And again, in the poll, I'll probably put a couple of different options in here, but they have lots of. I mean, they got lots of stuff in here. There's Native American stuff, and then there's Puritan stuff. Which, if you haven't read Puritan stuff, I think it's important if you like American literature to read a lot of Puritan stuff, specifically something like where is it in here? I'm reading from the front. So something like Samuel Sewell. Um, they've got some excerpts from Samuel Sewell, like the Selling of Joseph, and things like that. Mary Rowlandson's narrative or captivity narrative. Let's see. Roger Williams. Where Anne Bradstreet. That's who I'm looking for. Anne Bradstreet was a particularly good Puritan poet. So I would love to read some of her stuff. Um, there's some stuff from Anne Hutcherson, so that regards to a heretical preacher, Anne Hutchinson, in early Boston, which is interesting to some extent. I'm trying to figure out who wrote it. See, they've got, let's see, John Winthrop, who was the early governor of the Massachusetts colony. He had a couple of things like a model of Christian charity. I'm trying to find the exact author. I mean, there's a couple of other interesting works. Like I would recommend Cotton Mather's Magnalia Christia Americana. That's an interesting work. Um, and I don't know where it is or who. I can't remember who wrote it, but the work Plymouth Plantation is interesting as well. It's very interesting, especially with stuff like the Magnalia Christi Americana, how Puritan writers had this broad, almost apocalyptic, view of their taming the wilderness in America. They thought of themselves as like the new Jews that were coming into the new Canaan to subjugate the Canaanites, and clear the wilderness and build the city on the hill, all that sort of thing. That's an interesting perspective. I think Puritans are interesting, so if that's something you're interested in, again, that's going to be on the poll. Um, the next boy we've got here, this big chonker right here. This is the Barnes and Noble Canterbury Tales. This is the full thing. I will probably not read the full Canterbury Tales, but I will read the general prologue, and I will also read, specific stories from the Canterbury Tales because there's a lot. This is a lot. So that'll be on there. This translation specifically is by D. Lang Purvis. So if you don't like that translation, don't vote for it. And I don't know. The other thing I have is the Divine Comedy. This has Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. And it has the Gustave Doré illustrations, so maybe I'll put those up, on the screen while we're reading, and I love those illustrations. And the translation here is actually by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. The thing about Longfellow's translation is that it gallops, and it's more old-fashioned. It's a little bit less readable, but if you like the sort of galloping poetry that Longfellow is sort of known for, um, then you might like this, and you might want to. I probably won't read the whole thing, but like let's say you've read the Inferno, but you haven't read Purgatorio. A lot of people have read the Inferno, haven't read Purgatorio, or they haven't read Paradiso. I'm one of those that I read the Inferno, I read about half of the Purgatorio and none of the Paradiso, so maybe that would be a good work for us. And then finally, I have the book that we've been reading out of lately for Sir Gowing, which is the Longman Anthology of British Literature, 3rd edition, Volume 1A, The Middle Ages. So, in addition to Sir Gawain in the Green Knight, let's see about some of the other books in this anthology are, let's see, there's another translation of Beowulf. What is that? What is that translation? That might actually be Tolkien's translation. I'm not 100% sure. I'll let you know what the two translations are of Beowulf. There's some early Irish narratives and early Irish verse. So this would be Celtic period, pre-Christian Irish verse probably. There's another version of the Dream of the Rood. There's a collection of religious stuff. So there's excerpts from the Ecclesiastical History of the English People by Bede. Um, I've never actually read any of this Taliesin, but that's a potential. And then they have a collection of riddles. They've got Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. They have excerpts from Thomas Malory, who is most famous for Le Morte d'Arthur. They have some other selections from Chaucer, specifically like the Parliament of Fowls. Um, do 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 Let's see who else they got here. They got some Middle English lyrics. They got some stuff by Marjorie Kemp, so that's interesting. Um, anything else in here? Uh, Charles de Orleans. Nothing super interesting, I think. Yeah, that's what they've got in this anthology. So again, there'll be a straw poll linked to this video that'll give you options, let you vote on what's coming up next, and I have two books that are supposed to be coming in the mail. They should be coming soon. The first one's going to come late September. The other one's going to come early October. The first one is a translation of the Analects of Confucius, along with the Doctrine of the Mean and the Great Learning, I think is the other two tracts that are included with it. And that translation is by Legge, who he's sort of known as a more classic translator of Confucius into the English language. And then the other book that I have coming is what is it called again? It's the Oku no Hosumishi, I think it is, by Basho. So that's Basho is a famous Japanese poet. His haikus of the Edo period. His haikus were very popular in the Edo period, and he wrote what is essentially a travel narrative that is supposed to be very representative of Japanese literature of the period. And I can't remember what the guy's name is that does the translation, but he's sort of the typical scholarly translator of the work. So there's some Chinese and some Japanese, and then most of this is English and Middle English with some, there are some options for like Spanish conquistador narratives and stuff in the early American thing. But anyways, guys, like I said, poll be in the description. Let me know what you think. As always, this has been the Hidebound Convivium. God bless, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.